Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan McNeil. Thanks very much for tuning in. What I'm going to be discussing here today is local. It's regarding the place where I live here in Halifax. And even though we're talking about the city of Halifax, this is a perfect example. Unfortunately, it's a perfect illustration of what I've been talking about the last few episodes and in general with respect to government and competency and the type of reform that's going to be needed if we're ever going to get this thing under control, because it is wildly out of control at the moment. I don't believe that any of this is complicated. You don't need to be an economist or a politician to understand what's happening in Halifax right now. It's unfortunately a very simple illustration or demonstration of what I've been talking about. For anybody listening out there, when I say HRM, that stands for Halifax Regional Municipality, the city of Halifax. So HRM is proposing a 10.5% property tax increase. That's not a minor adjustment. This is actually one of the steepest increases that this city has ever pushed onto its residents when it comes to property tax increase. It's almost unheard of. When they talk about this 10.5% property tax increase, they refer to it as the average. That means that some people are going to receive property tax bills that are actually more than 10% increased beyond what they were last year. And on top of that, property assessments keep increasing. And so depending on the assessment of your property and how much of that 10.5% average you see, your property tax bill in the coming year could be drastically higher than it was the year previous. I'm also going to take a second here just to talk about commercial properties as well, because I don't think most people realize, but commercial buildings here in HRM pay 3 times the rate of residential property tax. 3 times. My property tax bill on this commercial building that I built a few years ago is $37,000 a year. $37,000 in property tax. The building that I'm referring to is a 4-unit commercial building. That property tax bill is the equivalent of an entire annual rent of 1.5 of the 4 units in the building. I want to say that again so that everybody understands that and they don't think that I misspoke here. If I take the entire annual rent of the whole building, the 4 units themselves, the property tax bill is a little better than 30% of the total value of all the rent collected from those 4 units. Over 30%. And of course, with this increase that they are proposing, that $37,000 bill is likely going to increase by $4,000 or more this year. So the same building with the same services, nothing new, is just going to cost another several thousands of dollars out of my pocket as the property owner, or the pockets of the people renting, or your pockets as homeowners, or whatever it is. It's a 10% increase on the fee you're paying for services, but you're not receiving any more service. It's bad enough that the municipality charges $37,000, soon probably to be $40,000 a year in property tax for this building. But there's a few things that are very important to note. It's important to note that the city provides this particular property with almost nothing. Certainly none of the big ticket items that you pay property taxes for. This property is not on a city road. It's on a provincial road. That means the province is responsible for snow removal and road maintenance, etc. I have no city water. I drilled a well on site. I have no city sewer. I installed a septic system on site. We have no sidewalks, no fire hydrants, no stormwater service. We don't even have garbage removal. We have dumpsters that we rent. That cost is on top of the property tax because I don't get garbage pickup included in my property tax. Simply, we don't get anything. This particular property is not city maintained and it doesn't have any municipal infrastructure of any kind. Yet we pay 3 times the residential property tax rate, and we have nothing for it. So this property tax increase is an enormous problem. It's an enormous problem for not just for the people who own property in HRM. It's going to be a problem for everybody in HRM, because if your landlord receives a 10.5% property tax increase on the apartment building that you rent, you're going to see an increase in your rent. None of this just gets absorbed. The municipality and the government, they like to suggest as though these increases and things that they trigger just somehow get absorbed by the people who first received the bill, but it doesn't work that way. It gets handed on. An average property tax increase of 10% in 1 year, it's unheard of. I don't know if that's ever happened in this city. And if that isn't enough, the other thing they're also proposing or about to push through, I think maybe even today they're voting on these things, is that they're also planning to increase user fees across the board. So those are things like rink rentals and rec programs, permit fees, planning and development fees, subdivision fees, application fees. And the justification that they give for all this is they say, well, not everyone uses these services, so maybe just the people who use them should pay more. You could say that about literally every service the HRM provides. Not everyone uses public transit or parks or sidewalks or libraries or sports fields, but we all pay for them because that's how cities work. That's how taxes work. That's how public services work. This only the users should pay for what they're using argument is nothing more than a way for the government to disguise the fact that this is just another tax increase. It's just another way for them to call it something else. Increases to things like rink rentals and recreation and those things, of course, are going to increase the cost for families and for people who use these facilities. And increasing things like permit fees and planning and development fees and so on are yet again, going to increase the cost of construction for new housing. Between this property tax bill and these increase in fees, here we are yet again with the government single-handedly making life significantly more costly for literally everyone. Nobody will be immune from this. You have to understand that raising fees on permits and development is just a direct tax on housing. That's all you're doing. You're increasing the tax on the cost of building and developing housing. Every dollar that you add to the cost of construction is a dollar that gets added to the final price. They do this at every level of government. The municipal government, provincial, and the federal government does this as well. They put something forward. They add something that's going to add a tax, right? It's going to add a fee. And they suggest that that fee or that tax is just going to be borne by the person receiving, like the builder or the developer or the business owner. But that's not how it works. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. The number one absolute biggest obstacle to building affordable housing here in Halifax is the municipality itself. And what I mean by that is housing that is more affordable, i.e. a lower cost, and more of it from a quantity perspective. I'm going to talk more about this in future episodes and future conversations because it's a big topic, but these property tax increases and these increases to fees and permit fees and so on are just yet again going to increase the cost of construction and further drive the cost of housing upward and less affordable. And when I talk about the municipality being the number one reason for the cost of housing ever increasing and for there not being enough housing and so on, it's not just about property taxes or increase of fees. It's delays, it's the bureaucracy, it's the inefficiencies, it's the endless steps and hoops that we have to jump through. And in some cases, just a sheer unpredictability from a developer's perspective. There's so much unpredictability in the process and the timeline and the cost and whether or not things will get approved or not. It's so unpredictable that many developers just don't bother. So of course, I'll talk more about the housing stuff in future episodes as time goes on. But for today, it's important to note that this 10% increase in property taxes is not necessarily the cause of the city's problems. It's a symptom of years of mismanagement. This is very straightforward. When you raise every cost associated with living and building and doing business in the city, then everything in that city becomes more expensive. It's not complicated. It's just math. There's no reason to think anything else. You don't have to have business experience to understand this. You don't have to have a university degree to understand this. If you increase the costs of everything, then everything gets more expensive. It's as simple as that. Okay, now just let me talk about the mayor for a minute here, and I want to be clear about something before I start. I don't attack politicians personally, but I do judge politicians and government officials the same way I would judge CEOs and managers or anyone in a position of responsibility. You'd look at things like, what did you promise to do? What did you deliver? And how does your actual performance compare to what you told me you were going to do, what you sold me on? And when it comes to Mayor Andy Fillmore, honestly, I think he seems like a pretty decent guy. I've seen him in interviews. I've met him once in a Tim Hortons parking lot. It was about a week before the election. He was polite and professional, and honestly, he seemed like a pretty normal guy. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is the job, his role, the position that he's in. Andy Fillmore was the member of parliament for Halifax. He was a member of the Liberal Party, the federal Liberal Party, and he was the MP for Halifax. He resigned from that position, which is just a nice way of saying he quit his job. He quit his job as the MP to run for mayor. So he has political experience, and he ran on a very specific set of promises. He promised to freeze the municipal tax rate for 2 years, conduct a value for money audit, identify inefficiencies before raising taxes, and he even said that it would be quote unquote brazen to do otherwise. So we fast forward 1 year. It hasn't been 2 years, it's been 1 year. There's no tax freeze. They didn't do an audit, and we're now facing the biggest tax increase that we have seen in decades. So the guy who said, if you vote for me, I'm going to freeze property taxes and I'm going to do an internal audit. I'm going to find out where the inefficiencies are, and I'm not going to do any property tax increases until I get to the bottom of this because it would be brazen to do otherwise. That guy, he got elected. And now they're about to put forth the largest property tax increase that we've seen in decades. It's insane. It's almost unheard of. He also did no audit that he referred to. And clearly, because he didn't do any audit, they didn't find any inefficiencies or determine where these inefficiencies were. And of course, this audit that they want to do, they suggest is going to cost $3.3 million. They're going to spend over $3 million to determine where the inefficiencies are and where they can save some money. Of course, they're going to find inefficiencies, but also, of course, they're not going to do anything about it. As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to finding efficiencies or identifying the inefficiencies, you don't need to hire some independent consulting firm and pay them millions of dollars to, again, have people who also probably have no idea the real world application of what it is that they're going to analyze. Now, they might be smart people, but if you want to find the inefficiencies, then find people who do those things and give them the responsibility of finding the inefficiencies and identifying them for you and being specific about it. If somebody's going to look at planning and development, probably going to be a builder or developer that has some understanding of the industry as a whole, but also the interaction with the city, how that process works. If I'm going to do an audit, an efficiency audit on policing, then it's going to be somebody who has policing experience. Maybe it's a former police chief. My point is, I would hire people who know what they're doing to assess the real efficiency of the government operation, the same way you would do if it was a business. So if we just step back from the government world for a minute and just apply this to the business world, if I ran a business and I hired someone as a CEO based on this pitch that they gave me, this very specific, measurable commitment, and then a year later, they did exactly the opposite, I wouldn't say, well, times are tough, what can you do? I'd say, you didn't do the job that you said you were going to do. I hired you because you promised to do these very specific things, and you've actually done exactly the opposite of what you promised. And it's not personal, it's performance. You have a role, you have a responsibility, you were hired to do a job. I think of positions that you want to be elected to no different than jobs that you want to be hired for. And the campaign process is just a long, drawn-out job interview where you have to sell yourself to all of these shareholders or voters as it is, and the voters then decide who they want to hire for the job. What we see happening in Halifax right now is simply the results of poor management, mismanagement, years of incompetent management at the municipal government level. HRM now needs $90 million just to maintain services. If you don't run things properly for years, eventually you're going to hit a wall, and that's where we are. If you just manage your company poorly for years and years and years, eventually that's going to catch up to you, and you're going to be in a situation like you are now, where you're going to have to make these drastic proposals to people to collect tens of millions of dollars more from the taxpayer to offset the terrible job that you've been doing at managing the business or the city or the province or whatever the jurisdiction is. One of the things that is driving the municipality to collect more money from taxpayers is, while residents are getting hammered with tax hikes and fee hikes, HRM is approving $38 million in wage increases. That's municipal employees getting raises. Municipal employees have some of the highest compensation packages in the province. They have fantastic pay and great benefits and great pensions and incredible job security. I mean, I don't think anybody ever gets fired from a public service job. And even though they have all these things, the service levels and operational efficiency are not just not improving, they're actually getting worse. We're paying more and we're getting at best the same thing, but in many cases, we're getting less. In the private sector, that absolutely would not fly. And in the government, it just seems to be automatic. It's just automatic that everyone gets a raise, everyone gets more, everyone that works for the public service gets proportionate raises to keep them ahead of inflation and keep their life comfortable so that they don't suffer the same way that the other people living in the same city as them suffer from the results of their incompetence. Again, bring it back to the business level. Imagine we're all shareholders of the same company, but some of us also are employees of the company. But imagine the employees of the company are doing a terrible job at what they do, and as a result, the company is coming to us as shareholders and saying, listen, we need you guys to give us some money, or we're not going to be able to provide you with the services that we're providing you. And while that would be bad enough news in and of itself, imagine if at the same time, one of the line items that required $38 million more from the shareholders or taxpayers was to provide pay increases and wage increases to the employees who are working for that same company. And these are the same employees and managers and politicians and board of directors who are responsible for the situation that we're in, and they want raises. And they're getting raises. So all of the rest of us are handing over more property tax and more fees for services, but the people providing those services are all getting raises to offset their costs of living. It's not right. And I'm going to mention something else here that this one's a little closer to home for me because it pertains specifically to construction, which is something that the municipality does provide. Everybody listening to this podcast has probably driven past a municipal job site, where the city is doing something. They're doing some road work or ditch work or whatever you might see. Everybody's driven past that. And they've seen 10 or 12 or 14 people standing around while 2 people do the work. And people say, well, yeah, you just don't understand what you're looking at. They're not really standing around. You need that many people to do the job. Well, I'm here to tell you folks, I owned a civil construction company for 5 years. I've been in the construction business for 20 years, but for 5 of those years, while I was also a real estate developer and home builder, I also was the owner of a civil construction company that did exactly the same type of work that these HRM crews do. Things like water and sewer and sidewalks and curbs and excavation and paving, all of those things. I owned a company for 5 years that provided that kind of work to the city because the city can't do it all. The city can't keep up with all that work, so they subcontract that work to other companies to do it. Well, when you drive by those job sites and you see 10 or 12 or 18 people there, and it seems like 4 or 5 of them are working and 10 of them are standing around doing nothing. 2 of them are sitting in the truck looking at their phone. 1 guy's leaning on the guardrail having a smoke. 2 guys are standing around holding a shovel, having a laugh. You see these things and people think, God, why isn't anybody working here? Well, you see those jobs where there are 10 or 12 or 14 people. When I owned the company that was doing that same type of work, we didn't send 12 or 14 people. We sent 5 or 6 people. And we sent 5 or 6 people because it's only a 5 or 6 person job. And in the private sector, you got to make that make sense. You have to make the finances work. You can't afford to send 12 guys to a 6 person job. Otherwise, what's happening is you're paying half a dozen people all wages all day, plus you paid for the truck to drive them there and so on. You're paying money that you shouldn't need to pay. And what the city does is they just send more people than are necessary. They just have extra bodies there. That's just how they do it. It has nothing to do with efficiency. They couldn't care less about efficiency. When you see that, trust your eyes. You're right. You're not imagining things. What you're noticing is the truth. You're noticing the truth of the situation in front of you. And I bring this up not because I'm trying to pick on the job site guys. It actually has nothing to do with the guys working on site. They're just told where to go, right? They just show up in the morning or the day before, whatever it is, they get their instructions. And they just get in the truck and they go to whatever job site it is that they're going to, and they do whatever it is that they're told to do, and then they come home. Now, some of those people are laborers and some of them are traffic control, although the traffic control is probably subbed out. It's probably not done by the city. But some of them are excavator operators and tandem truck drivers and, backhoe operators and whatever. Some of them are project managers. Some of them are foremen. So, of course, there's going to be some people who look like they're standing around, but they're supervisors, they're foremen. And of course that makes sense, but you guys all know what I'm talking about. You all know what I'm talking about. So this thing I'm throwing in has nothing to do with property taxes and the issue at hand today that I started talking about, but it all comes back to government efficiency. It all comes back to the inefficiency and the mismanagement of government. Now, moving forward, you might hear me say things like, if I were the mayor or if I were the premier. That doesn't mean I'm trying to be any of those things. It doesn't suggest that I want to be any of those things, but I just want to illustrate where I'm coming from. If I were the mayor, I would be making unannounced site visits on a regular basis. No media, no entourage, just me showing up on a job site, having a look around, and then leaving. If the city wants to fix inefficiency, this is where they start, on the ground, where the money is actually being spent. If you want to address inefficiencies, if you want to fix inefficiencies, yeah, sure, you could hire a consulting firm and bring them in and pay them $3.3 million to comb through the financials and whatever else that they do as they dig into it. But I can tell you what they're not going to do. I can tell you what this efficiency audit is not going to do. It's not going to involve anyone with construction experience jumping in a truck and going to a job site and looking around at what's happening and asking some questions and inquiring a little bit about how the scheduling takes place and why did you send 18 people and what do the financials look like on that particular job. If I'm doing an efficiency audit, what I want to see is, first and foremost, how much did that job cost? I want to see all of it. All of the wages, all of the labor, all of the trucking, fuel, machine time, materials, everything that went into that job. The municipality should be able to tell me exactly how much every job costs, because in the private sector, you can tell exactly how much every job costs. In the private sector, your whole business is about making sure that you know exactly how much every job costs you, because when you go do that job again the next time, you got to have a sense of how much it costs you to do and how many people it took to do it so that you can assess the situation correctly and operate as efficiently as possible and charge the right amount that you need to charge. The reason none of that happens at the government level is because the government is not accountable to the people who are paying the bills. The people who are paying the bills are you and I, the taxpayer, and the government is not accountable to us. Truthfully, they don't care what it costs. They don't care how long the job takes. They don't care if there were 12 people there and there should have been 6. They don't care if it took 4 days and it should have took 1 day. They don't care about any of that shit. Because what they do is exactly what they're doing now. They know that if they mismanage it terribly, as they always do, and everything just continues to happen the way it's been continuing, then what they're going to do is they're just going to go to the taxpayers and say, hey, everyone, we're jacking your tax because we need $90 million because we've managed this so terribly that the only way this can possibly even survive is if you give us $90 million to get this thing straightened out. Everything happening in Halifax right now, I see as a warning. It's a very loud, bold warning that we should all be paying attention to. This is what happens when systems are run on autopilot and when timelines are endlessly stretched and when no one is accountable and when politics replaces practical, real-world thinking. This is what we get as a result. And one other thing that I want to mention here today before I wrap this up. I know that speaking this openly is not doing me any favors as a developer and a builder here in HRM and in the province of Nova Scotia. I'm well aware that a lot of people in this industry keep their mouths shut because they don't want to get on the wrong side of the city or the province. You know, they don't want to make their life more difficult than it needs to be. Because as a real estate developer and a builder, I have no choice but to deal with the municipality. And that is a very real concern. But look, here's how I see it. For starters, I can't very well sit here on this podcast and YouTube channel and tell other people that they need to speak up and they need to take action and they need to say what's on their mind and they need to stand up for themselves. And then when something needs to be said in the arena that I am very familiar with, I don't say it because I'm concerned of how it might impact me personally. I mean, that would make me a hypocrite. So I can't do that. And secondly, I actually don't know how much worse the province or the municipality could really make the building process for me or anybody. It's already so painfully slow and inefficient that it is a complete nightmare to navigate as it is. I just don't think they could make it any worse. It's already ridiculous. The reason I'm even having this conversation is because we're already there. We're at a point where if people like me and other people don't speak up and try to do something about this, then it's going to get so far off the rails that we're never going to be able to turn it around. So on one hand, I understand the concern that people may have where they say, I don't want to get into it because I don't want to create an enemy, you know, with the government or the bureaucracy that I have to deal with in order to do my job and run my business and pursue my career. But again, I actually don't think they could make it any worse. I don't think they could make it worse if they tried. Sometimes I actually think they're trying to make the process difficult already. So it wouldn't really be anything new. You know, ultimately, if the choice is between keeping quiet while things fall apart or speaking plainly and dealing with whatever comes, then I know which one of those decisions are going to let me sleep at night. And it's going to be the one where I say what it is that needs to be said. And I don't worry about whether or not that hurts somebody's feelings or offends them. Because again, I'm not talking about people as individuals. I don't attack them personally, but I will call out their performance and their honesty and their competence. Because right now, those things matter. And they're all being pushed aside. They're all being ignored. All of those responsibilities, all of those things that we expect from our elected officials have become afterthoughts. And we just don't hold people accountable like we need to. And I think Halifax deserves better than that. And what's happening here in Halifax is a very unfortunate real world example and illustration of what I've been talking about for some time now. And that is the results of mismanagement, poor management, incompetence, no accountability, no transparency, all of the things that would never fly in the private sector. This is a result of all of those things happening for years. And now it has boiled over to a point that the people inside of the system can no longer deny what it is that they need. And what they need is a ridiculous amount of money from the taxpayers to pay for their mismanagement. And we have to stop allowing this. We have to stop allowing our government and our elected officials to get away with this. So that's it for today, folks. Thanks very much for listening. If you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.